Chapter 8. Survival. Amidst the chaotic atmosphere, the sound of Barnes's complaints and authoritative orders reverberated, underscored by veiled threats. Chris, however, remained resolute behind the wheel, his grip on the steering wheel a reflection of the simmering rage within him. His patriotism, a core aspect of his identity, had been called into question, fueling his inner fire. The distance separating him from his family, stretching across thousands of miles, was already a heavy burden. But the weight of the situation deepened when he considered that he was enduring this separation, this sacrifice, only to be judged by those whom he had sworn to protect. The irony wasn't lost on him, and it added a layer of bitterness to his anger. The roar of the engine and tension within the vehicle, Chris's internal turmoil mirrored the larger conflict playing out in the country. The clash between personal values, loyalty, and the demands of authority painted a complex portrait of the challenges faced by those on the front lines of the struggle. Nearing Tucson Station, Barnes's voice was nothing more than static noise playing in the background as thoughts of retirement began swimming around in his mind. No, they are not getting rid of me that easy, Chris thought as emotions boiled within. What makes you the great judge of personnel? Who cleared you for this position? Oh, Mr. Shaw, I've been vetted long before this administration came to power. In fact, this has been coming for quite some time, and I am proud to be part of this new beginning. As a country, we needed to be more inclusive of other countries, of the world, and ensure each is on an even playing field for there to be a just society. Wouldn't you agree? Barnes spoke as a true believer of his cause. Shaking his head at what he had just heard, Shaw snickered a little at the thought somebody would believe such garbage. You mean to tell me, just going by what you just said, you feel that because the United States is so much more powerful than most other countries, we need to be taken down? That rather than bring the other countries up to our level of society, we must lower to theirs? As Shaw's thoughts drifted from his inner musings back to the road ahead, he recognized that he had inadvertently missed his intended exit from Interstate 19. Annoyance flickered across his face, but he quickly refocused his attention on the road, vigilant for the upcoming exit that would reroute their journey. With his previous tour of service in Tucson informing his decisions, he was acutely aware that the next exit would lead them through areas known for their heavy gang presence. The choice before him was clear: a detour around these dangerous neighborhoods, albeit a longer one or a potentially quicker route that carried its own risks. The balance between expediency and safety became a tangible decision in that moment, emblematic of the choices that often define the delicate dance between personal safety and mission objectives. Barnes thought for a second, then replied, "Only at first, then all can be brought up as one with no other being better or stronger than their counterparts. This administration understands that for there to be true peace in the world and wars to end, each country must be placed on equal footing. How naive are you to believe that all countries of Earth can be placed equally with none wanting dominance over others? You want to end wars? Stop creating them. The Jackson administration was the first to go a full term without starting a new conflict in memory. Hell, Jackson even ended wars. You want me to believe?" Just then Shaw felt their car lose all power and begin slowing down as dash lights flashed rapidly before going dark. "What the hell happened?" Barnes asked as he pushed buttons on the computer mounted between them for signs of life. Shaw's hand instinctively turned the ignition key, the usual growl of the engine conspicuously absent. His brow furrowed in confusion as he glanced around, only to realize that none of the other cars on the interstate were in motion either. The eerie stillness of the scene seemed to settle over him like a shroud. As if on cue, the tableau of immobile vehicles began to shift. People emerged from their cars, their actions almost synchronized. Some raised their hoods, while others stood in small groups, exchanging uncertain glances and murmured conversations. The sense of a collective halt had transformed the bustling highway into a peculiar and surreal scene of suspended motion. Amidst this puzzling situation, Shaw's mind raced to piece together the puzzle. The previously straightforward journey had taken an unexpected turn, leading him into a scenario that was both bewildering and unsettling. Well, shit. It looks like everyone here has been made equal. What do you think, comrade? Puzzled Barnes looked around and exited the vehicle. What is happening? Shaw, what's that? Following Barnes's pointing finger, Shaw's gaze landed on a sight that sent shockwaves through him. The scene before him was nothing short of nightmarish. Multiple planes were descending, their approach far from any conventional landing strip. What made the scene even more surreal was the absence of landing gear, a stark indicator that something was deeply amiss. The truth struck him with a gut-wrenching realization. As the pieces fell into place, his expression turned to horror. "Oh, shit," he muttered, a blend of fear and understanding in his voice. The words that followed painted a grim picture of the situation. "I know what happened. An electromagnetic pulse. They've lost all power." The implications of his words hung heavy in the air. The sudden loss of power, the chaos that had ensued, and now the inexplicable sight of planes descending without control or guidance. It all pointed to a catastrophic event that had plunged their world into disarray. "I'll call it in," Barnes said as he pressed the mic button on his personal radio, only to discover it too had been affected. "I've got nothing." Shaw and Barnes stood in horrified silence, their eyes transfixed on the apocalyptic scene unfolding above them. The once orderly sky was now a chaotic theater of disaster. Planes, once symbols of human progress and freedom, now plummeted from the heavens, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Flames erupted as some aircraft crashed into buildings or the ground, reducing any semblance of order to a surreal landscape of chaos. A sense of helplessness gripped Shaw, his heart heavy with the weight of witnessing the tragic loss of thousands of lives in mere moments. Through the devastation, he grasped at a fragile thread of hope, focusing on the smaller planes that somehow managed to land safely, finding solace in these isolated moments of survival. With his attention consumed by the unfolding tragedy above, Shaw remained oblivious to the growing crowd that had gathered around their vehicle. "What's happened?" cried out on lone former traveler. "You gonna do something?" another stranded motorist called out. "Nothing is working. What do we do?" another yelled. As the crowd around them grew, the urgency and anxiety in the air became very noticeable. Shaw's realization struck with a sense of responsibility. While he and Barnes might not have been local law enforcement in times of chaos and uncertainty, such distinctions often faded into insignificance. People sought answers and reassurance from anyone who might provide them. Aware of the mounting tension, Shaw turned his attention to the growing crowd. Faces etched with fear and anticipation looked to him for some semblance of guidance. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, his voice projected to address the assembled gathering. "Listen up, everyone." His words carried a note of authority, an attempt to instill some measure of calm amidst the chaos. "We're just as bewildered by this as you are. What we do know is that something catastrophic has happened, likely an electromagnetic pulse that's knocked out all power. We're all in this together, and our priority should be finding safety and helping one another." His words were met with a mix of expressions, ranging from relief to concern. "It seems as though we have been hit by an EMP, since there are no working electronics, am I correct? Does anyone have a working cell phone or a way we can communicate with our station?" "Fool, we ain't got shit! What you gonna do about this?" someone shouted from the crowd. With his hands in the air to draw attention, Barnes began speaking. "We all are at a loss, but we will do our best to find out what has happened and relay that information. At this time, we ask you to remain with your cars till help arrives." Having seen scared crowds of people get out of hand before Shaw decided the best thing they could do is make their way back to Tucson Station on foot. "We are walking back to headquarters. I suggest everyone get somewhere they feel safe." Looking over to Barnes as he reached back into the car, Shaw knew it was the right move. Sticking his head back in the car, Barnes felt they were making the wrong call, lowering his voice so others couldn't hear. He disagreed. "We have to stay here with these people till help comes. We can't take off walking and leave them." Looking Barnes directly in his eyes, Shaw began to speak with certainty. You apparently haven't seen what happens when a scared group becomes violent. There is zero we can do here, and no help coming for quite some time. We don't even know how widespread this goes, if it's from a solar flare or an attack. One thing that is certain, we stay here, that crowd will turn on us out of fear. Now grab all sensitive items and let's get moving. Shaw expressed himself in a way to ensure there was to be no further debate on the subject. While those around them stranded on Interstate 19 slowly became more aggressive, Shaw grabbed his ready bag and stuffed everything he could inside, knowing their patrol car would be vandalized by the time they returned. These radios are fried. Why take them with us? Barnes asked, tossing his on the passenger seat. With a snicker, Shaw spoke. You must come from a section of government where there is no accountability for lost items or waste. Here, if you check it out, you are responsible for it. They will take it out of your pay, and nothing purchased by an overbloated government is cheap. Burned out or not, and it will not be here when they pick up the car. As he turned to start their walk down, Shaw saw his reluctant partner placing his radio in his pack. Shaw and Barnes traveled along Interstate 19. The sheer scale of the chaos became evident. People were stranded, bewildered, and desperately seeking answers. The sight of their uniforms seemed to evoke a natural assumption that they held answers, despite their lack of information. For every mile they covered, the chorus of questions grew louder and more desperate. Individuals they encountered yearned for clarity. What happened? Is help on the way? Do you have a phone? The anxiety was intense, and desire for information underscored the uncertainty that now gripped everyone. Amidst this swirl of concerns and inquiries, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of an exit. Shaw's eyes caught the sign, signaling a potential reprieve from the torrent of questions. The opportunity to divert from the highway offered both a practical escape from the ceaseless onslaught of inquiries and a chance to regroup and reassess amidst the chaos. I don't understand why we couldn't have just started walking straight to Tucson Station from our patrol car. Why did we have to waste a mile walking back the way we had come? Barnes complained as they stepped from Interstate 19. Experience from my previous time in Tucson. Blocks in that area were controlled by gangs and not somewhere you want to be taking a casual walk through in uniform, no radio or backup. Just rather err on the side of caution. Shaw navigated through his current situation. His thoughts seemed to constantly orbit around his family. He pondered the scope of the power outage, wondering how far-reaching its effects extended. The once taken-for-granted modern infrastructure was now exposed as a delicate web, easily disrupted. Though as they moved forward, a shift occurred in his thinking. The pressing concerns for his family began to intertwine with the urgency of survival. The immediate threats posed by the situation at hand demanded his attention, pushing aside the personal worries, at least temporarily. Shaw's focus shifted to the surroundings, the buildings, the signs marked with gang tags, all indicative of a challenging and potentially dangerous environment. In midst of the upheaval, his mindset transformed from a family struggle to a collective one as he grappled with navigating a world that had suddenly turned unfamiliar and hostile. We should see if any of these businesses have a landline and call for assistance, Barnes stated as he began to turn toward what looked to be a restaurant. Reaching out, Shaw grabbed hold of Barnes much like a father grabbing hold of a child about to walk into traffic. Okay, did they train you any before sending you here? Notice the open sign on the door? Confused and a little irritated, Barnes replied as he pulled free from Shaw's grasp. Yes, I saw it, and most restaurants have landlines still. I was trained for my job, and this is not my true job. Shaking his head in frustration, Shaw explained, Notice that gang tag on the curb near the front entrance? Or that they're open its prime time for business, yet no cars parked out front? Barnes looked at everything as Shaw pointed it out, still not sure what he was getting at. So, I've seen that graffiti all over, and as far as customers, maybe the place sucks. Though their conversation was only for a few seconds, Shaw knew from figures moving inside they had slowed for too long. Landlines wouldn't work either. It's a money laundering front. Get moving before they... Hey, Vados, what Chus doing? Out strolling in our streets holding hands? Someone asked who Shaw knew was obviously a gang member from his heavily tattooed face. Shit. Just keep walking. Shaw instructed Barnes, who seemed more than willing to move on. The innate human tendency to investigate changes in their environment was now working in their favor, offering a convenient distraction that they hoped to capitalize on. It was a stroke of luck amidst the turmoil, and Shaw hoped that this diversion would allow them to blend into the crowd and slip away unnoticed. Around them, the city streets had transformed into a chaotic expanse as people streamed out of buildings in every direction. The absence of electricity had drawn everyone to the streets, creating a mass of uncertainty and fear. Shaw's earlier prediction had come true. Panic had taken hold, and the city had erupted into a scene of chaos that was both alarming and disorienting. With their own anxieties and survival instincts guiding them, Shaw and Barnes sought to navigate this riotous environment, using the turmoil to their advantage as they attempted to circumnavigate the unknown and keep their presence as inconspicuous as possible. The city around them was a cauldron of chaos. Smoke billowed from burning buildings, carried on the wind like ominous locomotives of destruction. Fights erupted on nearly every street corner they approached, a manifestation of the growing tension and desperation that had seized the population. Shaw was acutely aware of the potential danger, particularly given the prevalence of violence that was unfolding before their eyes. He stood steadfast in his desire to avoid getting embroiled in such a situation. As they navigated the streets, Shaw was keenly observant. He noticed the reflections in windows and car mirrors, catching glimpses of the tattooed faces that indicated affiliation with the local gang. His intuition told him that they were still being watched, and the implication of that was not lost on him. Drawing from his past experiences dealing with this particular gang, he understood all too well how swiftly a situation could escalate. While he hoped to evade any confrontation, he remained vigilant, his hand hovering near his pistol in readiness. The potential for danger lurked at every turn, and Shaw's stance was a testament to his fortitude to protect himself and Barnes from the volatile environment that surrounded them. "I recognize that building. We can't be more than a mile from the station," Barnes said enthusiastically. From the distorted reflection in the tinted rear glass of a pickup truck, Shaw's sharp eyes detected more than just their original stalker. Numerous other tattooed faces had joined the observer, their presence underscoring the fact that they were being closely monitored. The gravity of the situation hit Shaw with a force he had rarely experienced in his career as a Border Patrol agent. The realization that his life, and potentially Barnes's as well, was hanging by a thread was sobering. The constant awareness of danger had always been a part of Shaw's profession, but this moment felt different. The thoughts of not making it home to his family, which had occasionally crossed his mind before, now consumed him with a newfound intensity. The stakes were elevated to a level he had never encountered before. Shaw's voice quivering with a sense of urgency, he looked around for an avenue to lose their pursuers. "It might as well be 100 if we don't pick up speed and lose these guys," he exclaimed, the urgency in his tone evident. Time was of the essence, and the need to evade their persistent followers took precedence over anything else. As he glanced at his partner, sent from Washington, and not yet fully informed about the situation, Shaw's mind raced with the weight of responsibility to ensure their safety in this brewing storm. "Lose who?" Barnes asked as he began to turn around only to be stopped by Shaw. "Don't turn around. Damn, I can't believe they let you out in the field with little to no training. We have to make a run for it or fight it out, and we are really outnumbered. Hell, I don't even know if you were trained to use that pistol." Shaw snapped. There was nothing Barnes had to say at this time that Shaw wanted to hear. Cutting him off, he began giving instruction. "We need to lighten our load and prepare to run. Don't do it all at once, but start ditching everything besides weapons and ammo. We don't want them to know what we're doing." "But you said to bring this gear because it's expensive and they would take it from our pay," Barnes argued. Wanting to hang his head down and shake it to show his disgust, he didn't but continued to seek out another reflective surface for surveillance on their tail, while thinking, how could anyone in government send somebody such as this into a high-risk environment to weed out non-supporters? What he said was, "They don't take it from your pay if you're killed." As Barnes' face turned pale, he understood just what he was being told. "I'm in good shape. I go running every morning. We could drop everything and easily outrun these guys." The panic in Barnes's voice struck a chord with Shaw, a clear indication that his partner was on the brink of making a rash decision. Shaw's instincts heightened as he anticipated Barnes's impulsive move, a sinking feeling settling in his gut. Before he could voice the reasons why such a course of action was ill-advised, Barnes acted. In an instant, Barnes abandoned caution and dropped everything, his sudden sprint cutting through the tense air. "Wait!" Shaw's desperate plea went unanswered, swallowed by the urgency of the situation. Barnes was already committed to his course of action, driven by his own impulse. Shaw's heart raced as he recognized the inevitability of the situation. He was now compelled to respond, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. The decision was no longer about strategy. It was about responding to Barnes's actions and moderating the potential consequences that could unfold in the chaotic environment around them. Now standing alone, Shaw dropped quickly to lay alongside a shotgun Barnes had dropped, with no hesitation in racking a shell in the chamber. He pulled the trigger almost as it locked into battery. Having seen positions of gang members prior to turning and dropping, he was confident the foot that vanished from his shot would soon be replaced by a screaming, tattooed face. Before he had finished racking in another shell, his hypothesis was confirmed. Split second later, that man's face also vanished. Now that his closest threat was eliminated, he hoped his buddies had retreated, but he knew that wasn't how they operated. Staying low, Shaw grabbed a handful of shells from Barnes's bag, stuffing them into his pocket except for 3. Instinctively, after firing, he had racked another shell in, and with 3 in his hand, he slid them into the magazine well, while looking for a safe path in the direction Barnes ran and their station. Rising for a quick pick, he saw few people remained, with exception of headless friends who were currently firing in his direction. At this point, he knew it didn't matter where he went, but there was no remaining still. Shaw's world had transformed into a volatile battleground. He sprinted from car to car, seeking refuge behind the thin shields they offered, his focus solely on locating Barnes amidst the pandemonium. The notion of gunfights being exciting, a fleeting thought in the past, was now replaced with an overwhelming sense of urgency and fear. He focused his attention towards the closest threat. Shaw's instincts took over. He aimed his weapon with precision, his fingers tightening around the trigger. The eruption of gunfire released 12 lead projectiles hurtling towards his target, the concussive force of each shot reverberating through him. He didn't allow himself the luxury of watching the outcome. Instead, he swiftly hunkered down, his movements a mix of speed and caution, as he sought to maintain his low profile while constantly scanning for any sign of Barnes or the encroaching danger that pursued them. Breathless, with high amounts of adrenaline coursing through his veins, Shaw was now closing in on the last turn before the Tucson station would come into view, just a short distance away. Every fiber of his being was on high alert, his senses honed to detect even the slightest of movements, no matter how distant. Each flicker of movement was processed instantaneously, and his mind calculated potential threats with a level of precision honed by dire circumstances. The chaos was omnipresent, and it seemed that gunfire erupted from every direction within the city. The constant barrage of shots had turned Tucson into a war zone. Among this pandemonium, the direction from which gunfire was originating was relatively easier for Shaw to pinpoint. He recognized the telltale sounds of shots coming from behind him, a distinction that helped him navigate the treacherous environment. Approaching the corner, Shaw positioned himself just off the brick wall of a building that stood at the corner, providing cover and a vantage point. With a deep breath, he cautiously peeked around the corner, his gaze intent on the Tucson station just beyond. In this perilous moment, Shaw's actions were guided by his survival instincts to reach the safety that the station could potentially offer. What he saw was worse than he had feared. Barnes was bound with zip ties, secured to a chain-link fence that encircled the facility. The scene unfolding before Shaw was a nightmare. 4 gang members were viciously assaulting Barnes, their punches a flurry of violence punctuated by their demands. "Turn them loose, or he dies." The gravity of the situation hit Shaw like a ton of bricks. The urgency to save his partner surged through him, overriding any fear or hesitation. His heart raced, but his focus remained unwavering. Every ounce of his training and experience kicked in as he assessed the situation, calculating the best course of action to rescue Barnes from the clutches of his assailants. Time was of the essence, and Shaw knew that he had to act swiftly and decisively to save his partner's life. Amid the chaos, the gang members saw their chance, exploiting the prevailing disorder to demand the release of their detained comrades. A sense of urgency and dread washed over Shaw as he comprehended the dire situation at hand. Shit, shit, shit! He couldn't help but exclaim, the weight of the circumstances bearing down on him. Grimly, he looked over his shoulder, recognizing that his pursuers were closing in, their gunfire sending brick fragments scattering above his head. In that tense moment, an unexpected clarity seemed to pierce through the fear that had gripped him. His course of action materialized before him and left no room for hesitation. Before he could fully process his decision, Shaw was in motion. He moved with a determined purpose, a fast-paced walk that led him back towards the very danger he had been striving to avoid. His steps were marked with an unwavering resolve as he confronted the adversaries that had been hunting him. Each confrontation was met with a barrage of gunfire, the recoil of his weapon reverberating through him. One by one, his assailants fell, their threats silenced by the strength that now coursed through Shaw's veins. In this life-threatening situation, Shaw had embraced his role as a protector and a fighter. His actions were driven by the need to save his partner and secure their survival, an instinct that overshadowed his fear and compelled him to confront the danger head-on. Shaw seized every opportunity to seek cover and reload his shotgun, his non-trigger hand moving with practiced efficiency as it slid shells into the weapon's chamber. With each life he had taken, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him, but he knew that he had no choice but to fight to protect both himself and Barnes. As he dropped at least 3 of their attackers, Shaw observed a shift in the tide of the battle. The remaining gang members who could still move were retreating, the threat they posed momentarily receding. With a keen awareness of the supplies at his disposal, he swiftly calculated his next move. Shaw turned back to his objective, saving Barnes, who he hoped was still alive and fighting for his own survival. Moving through an alleyway to minimize the risk of being spotted, Shaw's mind worked in overdrive. Countless scenarios played out in his head, each ending in the same grim outcome, the loss of either Barnes or both of them. Despite the bleak odds and no matter the cost, he was unwilling to stand by and allow these ruthless individuals to claim another life. With only 2 shotgun shells left, Shaw slung it over his shoulder to his back, pulling his service pistol from its holster. He knew there were 17 rounds in the magazine and 2 full magazines in his belt. Racking a round in the chamber, Shaw then ejected its magazine and replaced it with a full magazine, giving him 18 shots before having to reload. Placing the partial magazine in his ammo pouch, he held his other full mag at the ready. Looking from relative concealment, he calculated at least 100 yards between him and those brutalizing Barnes. Shaw's mind churned through countless scenarios, all of them fraught with peril. He emerged from his mental calculations with a singular purpose. Exiting his contemplations, he found himself standing with his pistol aimed at the nearest target. His footsteps were measured and steady, each one propelling him closer to his intended objective. In the midst of this focused approach, his finger curled around the trigger, tension growing with each advancing step. Shaw's concentration was so intense that he was barely aware of anything beyond the immediate threat in his sights. However, reality suddenly snapped back with a jolt as voices shattered his tunnel vision. Shouts from one side intruded upon his intense focus, the word Holmes cutting through the chaos. Gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks of bullets reverberating through the air. Shaw leapt for cover, the ground providing refuge from the incoming fire. In this heart-pounding moment, the plans and scenarios that had occupied Shaw's mind only moments before gave way to the immediate need for survival. Shaw's heart pounded within his chest. In a split second, his finger squeezed the trigger, releasing the firing pin and sending a bullet hurtling into his intended target's lower back. The impact reverberated through the man's body, and Shaw wasted no time in redirecting his aim, firing methodically at each threat that stood near Barnes. The thunderous sound of gunfire was interspersed by the lookout's retaliatory shots, their bullets narrowly missing their mark. Shaw's focus was unwavering as he prioritized preventing the remaining assailants from using Barnes as a shield. His actions were swift, but the sequence of events was a blur of movement and gunfire as he relentlessly engaged the threat. His proficiency with his weapons was evident as he seamlessly transitioned from one threat to another, keeping the pressure on the enemy. The slide of his pistol locked open after expelling the last rounds, prompting Shaw to swiftly drop the spent magazine and reload. The rhythm of the battle continued as he methodically took down each of the 4 men who had posed a direct threat to Barnes. As the last foe fell, Shaw's attention shifted to the remaining gang members who continued to fire from a distance. Holstering his pistol with practiced ease, Shaw's hands moved with fluid precision to swing the shotgun into his grip. He took aim, ready to face down the distant adversaries. Shaw fired both remaining shells, knowing that at such distance each would cover a large area as they spread, leaving those in the way nowhere to run. With 2 of 24 balls striking with one in his leg and another upper chest, the men screamed in pain as they rolled around on the ground. Returning the empty shotgun to his back, Shaw drew his pistol once more and reloaded it with his remaining magazine. Hearing the receiver drop as it placed a round in ready to fire, his thoughts were to walk over and shoot the screaming gang member in his head. But even during times like this, he felt his training as law enforcement scream at him how unjust it would be. Watching those bleeding out near Barnes for movement, he was assured by multiple bullet holes they were no longer a threat. Still, he held his pistol in one hand, while taking out a knife to cut Barnes free. Through a split fat lip with blood covering his face, and not all of it his, Barnes began to speak. "Thank you. Thank you. I knew they were going to kill me." A few personnel from inside their station exited, making their way over to aid them, as Shaw wrapped Barnes' arm around his neck to help him walk. "We'll talk about it later. For now, let's get you inside." "No, I ran and left you. You still saved me, Shaw," Barnes said, almost crying. "Call me Chris. Nobody uses last names around here long," Shaw stated in an attempt to console his beaten companion. "Well, thank you, Chris. I am very—" The sounds of gunfire enveloped Shaw, drowning out any words that Barnes might have been trying to convey. In a matter of moments, the agents from inside the station had responded, their bullets finding their target and ending the threat of the wounded gang member. The sudden eruption of gunfire was as swift as its end, leaving behind an eerie silence in its wake. Shaw's attention returned to Barnes, the weight in his arms growing heavier. In the dim light, the grim truth revealed itself, a hole in Barnes' chest where a bullet had exited, the consequence of Shaw's choice to spare the tattooed face gang member. Setting Barnes down gently, the weight of his own actions or inaction pressed upon Shaw's shoulders. Regret and frustration surged through him, mingling with the raw emotions of the chaotic situation. The iron grip of hindsight twisted at his gut as he realized that if he had followed his instincts and eliminated the wounded man, Barnes might still be alive. Frustration and anger swelled within Shaw, manifesting in a scream of agony and resentment as he lashed out at the chain-link fence. In this moment of intense emotion, the boundary between the personal and duty blurred.